Behind me is a 2021 Ford Transit Explorer, and it's better than your SUV. Just like back in the 90s, this started off its life as a 2021 Ford Transit passenger van. However, a company based out of Indiana got its hands on this and turned it into one of the most luxurious vehicles you could be driving on the road today. It has everything ranging from a TV, wireless chargers, a refrigerator, and so much more that you want to make sure you check this out, so watch the whole video. Now, I borrowed this van from a friend of mine, and when a friend of yours offers to let you borrow a six-figure luxury van, you take them up on that. Now, before we get into exactly what this is, I want to talk a little bit about competitors, because that kind of sets the stage for what I'm going to be talking about in this video. The direct competitors to this would technically be things like the Mercedes Sprinter and, of course, the Ram ProMaster. However, because of this Explorer badge right here, this is a conversion van, which is essentially a luxury people hauler rather than something like a cargo van. So really, this is also a competitor to things like a Suburban, a Yukon XL, Ford's own Expedition Max and Lincoln Navigator, along with the Cadillac Escalade and Nissan Armada, as well as the Infiniti QX56. So when you start looking at price points of a lot of those, when they're spec'd out to something similar, this becomes a really interesting option, especially in the used market. So with that said, let's talk a little bit more about this Explorer nameplate. You probably think of the Explorer as the Ford Explorer. It's the three-row SUV that I honestly have owned two of already. However, this is not the same Explorer. This is not the one that Ford has built, and Ford actually doesn't build this Transit Explorer. The Explorer is actually the name of the conversion company that bought these Transit vans, took it to their Indiana facility, and completely turned it into something completely different. And they don't only do Ford Transit vans, they also do things like the Mercedes Sprinter and some of GMC's vans as well. And their goal has been to create a no-compromise people hauler where every single seat in the van is just as comfortable as the next, instead of what you get from more compromised SUVs, where things like the third and sometimes fourth row are really just kind of compromised and not comfortable. So with all of that said, let's get into this. So I'm going to start the tour off by talking about what's under the hood. So this is actually a turbocharged 3.5 liter EcoBoost engine, and it's mated with a 10-speed automatic transmission. And from what I have seen, it gets anywhere in between like 17 to 21 miles per gallon, depending on who's driving and where you're driving. And I will say this is also an all-wheel drive system, which Ford is the only one that's making that now in a van like this. And it also makes about 310 horsepower and 400 pound-foot of torque, which I will say from driving it, it's kind of a blast. And I think you probably would find it fun to drive. It is quite entertaining. Main downside I see on it is I do see the 10-speed automatic transmission does kind of search for gears a little bit more than I would want. However, I was surprised at how peppy the driving experience is, as you can hilariously hear the turbos spool up. What is most important with this Transit van is, of course, on the inside. However, there is a lot to talk about on the exterior as well, so let's get into that. So, of course, starting up right around front, you have these really cool swooping headlights that come to a point over here. You, of course, have the somewhat Aston Martin looking front grille that is still sticking around from years ago. And one thing that sets this apart from the rest of the Transit vans out there is the fact that the passenger van has matching front bumpers. So as you can see right here, this is matching blue to this blue, whereas the normal cargo vans would be black right here, and then they wouldn't have things like those fog lights. It should also be mentioned that this is the medium depth roof. So basically you could fit this into an 8-foot or above garage. The regular roof is kind of cuts right around there. However, there's a little bit taller. And then of course, like what you see most of the time on the road is the tall roof. That's kind of the people that get into like the van life and that kind of stuff and want to turn this more into kind of essentially a moving home. That would be what you see with those really tall vans. And moving along the side here, this is actually a pretty nice looking van. I am really happy with the changes they made with this van over the past generations. They look a little bit more friendly and a little bit more styled, instead of just being a giant box. You of course have this sliding door right there, which is really nice. It is automatic, so you just have to pull the handle and it goes backwards, and then you do the exact same thing and it automatically goes forwards. You can also pull the handle handle one more time in the middle of it doing it, and it'll actually stop as well. It of course also has massive tinted windows, and coming around to the wheels, you have 16-inch aluminum wheels. Now, while most things on the outside of the van aren't all that weird or anything like that, kind of the weirdest thing on the outside that I have seen so far is the fact that you can't open your gas cap, which is right here, without opening the front door, which is kind of weird. And it's also, I guess, a way for them probably to have better security so people can't steal your gas, maybe. Well, anyways, as you can see right here, there's no way to get in. And then what you do is you have to open this door, and then you can see right here there's a little tab, and you just swing it open, and there's your gas tank. We also can't forget, while we're over here on the side of the vehicle, that this thing does have automatic side steps. All you do is you open a door and they open right up. That is really nice. They also do, as you can see there, they do have lights to be able to light it up so you can get in. Now that we're around back, let's go ahead and open up these rear doors that are kind of one of its defining characteristics, well, as a van. So let's do that. So now this one is actually a 4-row model, which means there isn't a crazy amount of cargo room in the back, which is a bit unfortunate. However, that gives you tons of features on the inside instead. Back here, you'll also see things like a tow hitch, of which this is a 250 model, which is kind of like in line with things like the, the Ford F-250 and that kind of stuff. So it has a really good towing capacity. And then of course you have everything you need for wiring up a trailer. Moving into the inside of the back, there's quite a few things you wouldn't normally see in a normal SUV, which really is what's starting to set this thing apart from them. So one of my favorite features is the fact that this thing comes with a vacuum cleaner, which you can see right here. Now, unlike minivans and that kind of stuff, they actually just kind of gave you a rechargeable hand vacuum. However, it's an Armor All brand, which is pretty good. Back here, you're also going to find things like your rear unlatch. You can open the rear doors from the inside. Right here, you're going to find a cigarette style lighter, which you can use for, charging things. Most people aren't going to use it for cigarettes anymore. And then they have also even included things like a little bit of storage behind this net right here, just in case things are rolling around in the back. On the doors, you're going to find the first of many speakers throughout this van. You have access to being able to fold seats, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. And then of course, you also have these rear blinds in the rear windows, which we'll see some in the front as well. All you do, you just pull them up. All right, we are finally on the inside of the 2021 Ford Transit Explorer. And this is a really nice place to be. It is a completely different feel than what you're used to from most SUVs and cars and trucks. Because, well, it's a van, but it's a really nice van. But this includes things like a really nice leather wrapped steering wheel that has all of the different things, including your cruise control, which by the way, this has adaptive cruise control, and it has all of your stereo controls for easy access, which is nice because a lot of manufacturers don't necessarily do that in their cars. You have easy to understand stocks like your windshield wipers, and even on this stock over here, you can easily change things like your cruise control and even how far you want the car to follow the car in front of you. Now the dash isn't something really to write home about. It's honestly not all that different from our 2013 Ford Explorer, which I guess isn't a huge deal because this is a van after all. However, it would be nice to have a full digital display being a 2021 model. The dash is actually pretty nice. While the top is of course hard plastic, underneath of that is a cool, it's almost kind of like a fake wood grain, but it feels really nice and you kind of find that texture all throughout the cabin. On that dash, you also find things like your HVAC vents and of course this 8-inch navigation display. I will say this display is actually pretty nice. So it is Sync 3, so it does have Apple CarPlay, it does have Android Auto, which you can access by putting your USB in this port right here. And the system itself is pretty responsive, easy to use. I poked around in it and it works really well. I have really no complaints. It's extremely simple and it's just pretty good. I wouldn't say amazing, but it's good. And then right underneath of this vent right here, you have access to 4 different buttons, one of which is Park Assist, and then also things like traction control, and you can change through your different modes, which includes things like just a normal drive mode, eco, that kind of stuff. Nothing really to write home about. It is a van after all. Going back to that display, of course, it does have your music as well, but you do have physical buttons underneath, which is really nice so that you don't have to look away from the road to be able to see it. It's nice to see that because most manufacturers are starting to move away from having physical buttons like that for your stereo controls. And on that note, they also have not moved the HVAC controls into the display quite yet. I haven't actually seen it, but there is a 12-inch display you can get for this. I'm gonna bet things like that did move into the display. However, on the 8-inch display right here, you still have physical controls. Now moving to the gear selector, and this kind of reminds me a lot of other vans out there. It's actually based on the dash instead of on the floor, like most vehicles, because most vans need to be able to, you know, get through the middle of the two seats here. So having your gear selector there makes a lot more sense. Now, of course, on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you have things like your headlight controls, which are pulled right from, honestly, what my Explorer has as well. And then you have mirror controls, and you have your access to things like your windows, and then locks and your door handle. One thing I should note is from this driver's seat right here, I have access to 6 different cup holders. Yes, 6 cup holders. That means I can have 6 drinks without any worry. And then up above your dash, you have something that a lot of other vehicles don't have, which is storage on your dash. So up here you have things like a USB, you have a 12 volt, which is kind of your cigarette style lighter. And then you have up to 4 different compartments on your dash that you can put things like maps or just other things that you need to be able to store and have easy access to while you're driving. Now I should also mention the driving position of this seat is very upright. You can definitely see over. If you saw my HiAce review, it is actually very, very similar to that. And you feel very upright. The steering wheel is more like a van where it's actually kind of tilted forward. However, when I was driving, it felt really natural, and honestly, it was a really nice position that I liked a lot. These do have massive windows. You don't have too many blind spots because of them. You have big windshield, big side window, and then big mirrors. It is really easy to get around. I did back it up a couple different times, and it really wasn't a problem. Moving to the center console, you have 2 of those cup holders that I had mentioned earlier, and then on the front of it, you have a side little pocket here that you can kind of put things like maps in, which who carries maps anymore? And then hiding underneath of the center console is a refrigerator. Yes, another refrigerator. How cool is that? And then sitting right behind that refrigerator is actually a wireless charging pad, which is pretty cool to have, especially when you're talking about a vehicle that essentially is a cargo van retrofitted for passengers. Let's talk about the passenger seat. The passenger seat actually is a pretty nice place to be as well. However, outside of things like access to cup holders, there's really not much different from the driver's seat and nothing that makes it too crazy special. And then before we move to the back of this van, I want to talk about what you find up here. Right up here, you have things like your cabin lights and all the different lighting that you find in the rear of the van so that you have control of it in the front as well. And it's just these simple little buttons. And as you can see, they are branded with the Explorer badge. So this was actually something that was installed and retrofitted by the brand. Outside of that, you do have more access to controls for HVAC. I think this is more for the rear of the van. Now, one thing I should mention is the seats in this thing. They are so nice, really nice leather. They're very plush, and the stitching in these things are so nice. I really like these. Of which they are, of course, all automatic. Wait, I found one more cup holder that the driver can get to, of which, by the way, this is how you get to the hood. Now, while the front is great and all, the rear is where it's at here, and where the most attention has been paid to making this a nice experience. Of course, all the really nice seats from the front have carried into the rear. Each one of the seats in this van is all the same quilted leather with really nice stitching. This van in particular is actually the 9-passenger van, so you actually have 4 different rows. However, the 3 rows are all captain's chairs, whereas the 4th row is set up for 3 passengers. And is your bench seat. But what that also means is that you can easily walk from the front of the vehicle all the way to the back without any issues, making this a perfect family vehicle. And then each one of the seats gets 2 cup holders, of course, except for this seat next to the door. Because they have the door, unfortunately, this is the one seat that doesn't get quite as many amenities. As we saw in the rear of the van, we do have curtains in here, tons of lighting all over the top of the vehicle. And you remember those drink holders that we talked about earlier? Yeah, they're lighted. You have USB charging ports throughout the vehicle. And the star of the show comes down to entertainment. Up top, you have a 29-inch TV that's been installed and an LG Blu-ray DVD player, which comes out of tons of different speakers throughout and even has a JBL subwoofer. And you don't have to stay just to your Blu-ray DVD player because there is an HDMI input, meaning you can install your favorite gaming system. And each of the seats throughout the cabin are easily adjustable forward and backwards, and anything that should be leather is leather. You even have interesting storage solutions up here that make it easy for keeping things like games, books, or just anything you would want in there. So as you can see, this is an extremely nice place to be. They went above and beyond when they converted this over to being a luxury people hauler. So what do you think? Leave it down in the comments. All right, so we have talked about a lot of the different features in this van, and so I kind of want to go into the pros and cons of the van so you can kind of decide for yourself if it's right for you. So let's start with the good, and it really starts off with the fact that there is so much room in this van. It is just wild to me. This is a 9-passenger van. You can actually have this all the way up to 15 passengers. However, this Explorer is equipped with a 9-passenger just for that ease of access to all the seats, extreme luxury and that kind of stuff. But there's just so much room in here that you just can't get in an SUV or even a luxury minivan. Next up is gas mileage. This thing is pretty impressive considering it's competing with pickup trucks really in its size. Getting up to like 21 miles per gallon is honestly pretty impressive, which makes this a good kind of cross-country vehicle. And then there is comfort. It's hard to show on camera sometimes. However, the quality of materials in this is really impressive. While, you know, the front is stuck to being a van and a lot of the materials there, it is still really nice, and I do like a lot of the materials. They are a little bit cheaper. However, in the rear of the van, just the quilted materials, leather everywhere, stitching, the TVs are high quality, the vents, all the different patterns and stuff. It's just a really high quality experience, and it's really nice. And then the other thing I like about this is its styling. I actually really like this mid-depth roof. It gives you a lot of kind of headroom on the inside of the van, but it also still looks really nice. And it also makes it so it's easier for you to park it in a garage and that kind of stuff. However, this newer generation of vans just looks a lot better than the older ones. It's a lot sleeker, it's a lot more normal, it's a lot more just easier to be driving on the road and not feel like you're driving a big just cargo van, because it really is a luxury vehicle. Now, as for downsides, the main downside really is the price. These things are $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 on the used market, and they can go up into the 6 figures if you're looking at a 2023 model, which is just nuts because you're starting to compete with things like the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, which is over $100,000 if you equip it right. Things like even the Hummer EV, you're competing with those. These are not cheap by any means. However, when you look at the pros over the cons, they can be worth it. Another thing is just its pure size. This thing is massive. Like, it is really, really massive. Well, I will say it is actually pretty easy to drive. I did drive it quite a bit and turned it in circles and all that kind of stuff, and it was really easy to drive, and I was really surprised at its turn radius. It's an easy to drive vehicle, however, it is still just massive, and people in the city may not be able to get this. And then finally, specific to the Explorer model, which is the conversion van rather than the standard one you would buy straight from Ford, this wouldn't be a very good overlanding rig. A lot of people buy these because they want to turn it into an overlanding vehicle. However, unfortunately, a lot of the cost has gone into this back space here with the seats and all the speakers and all that kind of stuff, and that's not normally something you want in an overlanding rig, and I think you'd be spending a lot of money that would not be necessary. I would recommend starting with maybe just kind of a standard passenger van from Ford, or even a cargo van, because this just might be a little bit overkill for you. So with that said, that is everything that you guys need to know about the 2021 Ford Transit Explorer. It is an impressive vehicle, and I think you probably can see why I would compare it to an SUV. It's less of a van and more of an SUV, but just more capable for hauling people and more luxurious. And I think people should cross-shop it a little bit more. So if you are in the market for things like an Expedition, a Suburban, a Yukon XL, an Escalade, that kind of stuff, I think you should probably take a look at this first. So with that said, make sure to subscribe if you like videos like this, and then also like this video as it helps me out with the algorithm. And of course, as always, if you need prayer, leave it down in the comments. I would love to hear and pray for you.